And then finally, in terms of what did not happen, and here there's a strong caveat, is what we do not yet find, and this is where we may find it when we look into the last 2 weeks of our data. We do not yet find, and Chris Prosser and I have worked hard at checking that we are correct, that we don't find that there is a significant or substantial effect of the threat of the SNP forming a coalition government with the Labour Party. So we ask people whether or not you think there's a chance of each party being part of a coalition, part of the government. Does not mean to say that that's not there, but we can't find an effect of those people switching back to Labour or switching away from Labour. We don't find an effect of people switching back to the Conservatives. We find a very, very, very small effect. And when I say effect, at this stage, I'm talking about relationships, but we're looking at change, those people that change their views. Did they change their views? Was more if they also agreed that the SNP would be part of the next coalition government. We find a very small effect of those people who move back from the Conservatives to the UK Independence Party. In terms of where we did see some movement, in our data, I said we didn't see very much change over the campaign. Where we did see change over the campaign, it was from UKIP voters moving back towards the Conservative Party. For every 2 voters, or every 1 vote that the Conservative Party lost to UKIP during the election campaign in those 4 weeks at the beginning, the Conservative Party won 2 votes back from UKIP. And there's a really fascinating question, I think, which is, how inevitable was that? Had it not been for the perception of the increased perception of a hung parliament, had it not been for various other campaign dynamics, there were so many of those UKIP voters who we knew the Conservatives were still their second preference. We knew that they had come from the Conservative Party. We knew that UKIP's vote was more volatile and more flimsy going into this election campaign. And it's highly plausible that the idea of an Ed Miliband prime ministership presiding over what had been economic recovery and concerns about Labour's economic handling might have shifted those UKIP voters back to the Tories. And I'll tell you why. The next thing that I wanted to say was one of the things we find loud and clear in our data is that UKIP voters returned to the Conservative Party in constituencies in which they could stop a Labour or a Liberal Democrat gain or hold. And so we know those UKIP voters preferred a Conservative majority government over any other alternative, barring Nigel Farage walking into number 10. And so in that sense, what I think was clearly happening strategically, helping the Conservative Party translate those votes into seats, was a lot of strategic voting from UKIP voters returning to the Tories where it counted. And what's interesting about that is that, in a sense, it might be something of a misnomer to give a lot of focus to the argument that Labour has lost a lot of votes to UKIP in the north because it's the working class kippers who are going to UKIP away from Labour, and this is a big part of Labour's problems. One of the problems it might appear such might simply be that UKIP voters were more likely to go back to the Conservatives in the south of England, where they could stop a Labour or Lib Dem MP, whereas in the north of England, where it was more commonly a Labour stronghold, they didn't have any incentive to do anything else but vote UKIP. It really made no difference to the election result in their individual constituency. And so this is, I think, one of the just fascinating nuances of the night.